Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today we have a deck profile for you, another update to Zephyr. This is pure Zephyr, well, pretty pure Zephyr, small little side engine in here because that's kind of how they roll. Is like pure Zephyr feels like they just need a little side engine to kind of keep everything together, but it works, so you know, it'll do. Before we get into this, I do want to say shout out to Anthony Williams. He played a variant similar to this. It's a variant that I had been eyeing up for probably like a year and a half, that I was always like, but I'm not exactly sure where to go with it. So now that I finally saw like a build that gave me the inspiration to try and like, you know, make my own build with it. So they're going to be somewhat similar, but not entirely the same. Just want to say shout out to him. He had a profile on Yassine's channel, and you know, I've always been playing Zephyr. I've always been looking at that build, and finally seeing it gave me the inspiration to like push forward on that build. So yeah. Other than that, Zephyr is amazing, incredible rogue deck. It just has so many strong points that just make it like an awful matchup for like multiple decks. And yeah, it's about, other than like maybe, I don't know, Magispectors is like the only like control version of a pendulum deck in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So we'll take that. All right, let's get into this thing. Starting off with our monster lineup, of course, is triple copies of Zefrath, triple copies of Zephyr, and right now I have one Zefraxiton and one Zephyr Wendy. These are essentially your quote-unquote high scales, ideal high scales at least. Zefrath obviously being able to copy whatever scale he sends from your deck to the extra deck, but most situations you always want to be sending Zephyr unless you just already have him in hand. And yeah. One other thing I do want to mention here is I actually only have one Zefraxiton right now. I kind of do want to play the second one and probably just swap it for the Wendy. Probably just take Wendy out of the deck. It feels weird, but like, yeah, I love Wendy. She comes up all the time, but in this variant, she's just a little bit less good than she is in like some of the other builds I've played. So maybe just swap her for a Zefraxiton. We are hyper-focusing on the Tellarknights. You'll see as we go a little deeper here. But still really strong. Obviously, if you're not super familiar with Zefras, Zefrath is kind of like Hidden City in Subterrors, whereas Zephyr is more like Guru. This is the card the deck really focuses around, but this is the best starter for sure to get your players going. All right, then for our low scales, triple copies of Zefraxi, triple copies of Zephyr Thubin, and double copies of Zephyr Naga. This feels pretty good. In this build, Zephyr Naga ends up being the best other low scale you can play. I do think there's a little bit of traction with Zephyr-Tellarknight because her effect like usually doesn't come up, because when she's normal summon, she can reborn a Zephyr monster from grave, but because we're playing pendulums, they don't end up in there as often. In this build, however, we do focus a little bit more on rank 4s. So when our Thubins and our Zefraxitons are getting detached from rank 4s, they are ending up in grave a little more often. So that could be a thing. But the other thing is like they also don't trigger when they're summoned by the Zephyr-Tellarknight that way, because they only trigger when they're like normal or pendulum summoned, not when they're just generically special summoned. So there's that. But still, Naga's really cool though, because Naga can facilitate plays where Thubin and for Zefraxiton target a Zephyr card you control in your monster zone or pendulum zone to destroy alongside a card from your opponent has. If you pendulum summon Zephyr Naga with them in that same pendulum summon, you can make Naga a later chain link and bounce the target you would be popping. So you target something like in your scale with the Thubin to pop, and then you, as chain link 2, use Naga to bounce that same scale. You still pop the opponent's card, but you get to keep your card and it gets back into hand. And, you know, you just keep rolling that way. So definitely really nice card. Definitely the best other low scale you can play in this variant for sure. Then for our like other engine, is pretty much just this, triple copies of Tellarknight Deneb. The idea here is this card just has a ton of utility. It's either a low scale or a high scale. Ideally, you don't want to have to be searching a high scale, because that means you just don't have Zefrath in your opening hand, but it is what it is, right? If you just have like Zephyr plus a low scale plus Deneb, you kind of just have to search Zefraxiton just to get a pen summon on the Zephyr to get a like some kind of interruption set up. Not ideal, but it works. It's also level 4. It's also just a +1, an extra body. So you can link climb easier. You can make rank 4s easier. I like it because like if your hand's already good, it's going to add a rank 4 onto your like starting board. And if it's not, if your hand isn't great, hopefully it's getting you whatever one piece you are missing. Again, like the one thing that I would say is missing from this engine is that it just doesn't search Zephyr. Not in a good way, at least. And so that'd be the one thing I look out for a side engine, is like what not only can give me utility to grab a low scale or Zephyr, but also gives me the utility of, like, if my hand's already good, makes my board even stronger. It does pretty much everything except search Zephyr, and that's really the only downside you could even argue for the time being. All right, from there, pretty basic Zephyr stuff. Triple Gamma. This card is insane in pure Zephyr. You activate so many cards before you really commit anything to the field, so insane. And I'm on one Lancia. Shout out to Anthony Williams on this one. It's just like a one-off powerful hand trap that if you go through the Croco Dragon play, you can search. I do think that makes it so that, like, you probably should be siding Token Collector in this deck. Like, if you do play a matchup like Sword Soul, you can just side that as a one-of going first, and if you do the Croco Dragon going first, you just search it, and now you just have a Token Collector chilling that you searched probably alongside one or two other interruptions, and that's probably just game. But yeah, it's a cool one-off, and it's like not even bad to draw. It's good versus a lot of the matchups in the game right now. If you're going to play hand traps and you're only going to play 4 or 5, you need to be playing more powerful ones, so I think these fit that bill pretty well. For the consistency spells, 4 copies of Oracle, triple copies of Providence, 1 Rhoda. This is searching either Deneb or Thubin. Sometimes it is better to just raw search Thubin instead of going for Deneb. Double Prosperity, and I guess we'll throw 1 Called by the Grave on the end there. Yeah, just essentially all consistency cards one way or another. All of these cards are pretty much being extra copies of Zephyr unless you already have access to him. Which is really sweet. You need to see Zephyr in pretty much every duel. It is so much harder to win a duel without Zephyr. Early, that's why I opted to play Prosperity. The build I saw from Anthony was not playing Prosperity. He was playing like Upstart. I think Upstart, and I think he was playing the double or nothing package. We'll get to that. I'll talk about that more when we get to the extra deck. But I really want to focus on consistency. We've got 10 copies of Zephyr, and this can give us a little bit more. They're just a really good card, and if your hand's already good, you only need to like banish 3 for this, because there's nothing that's like, whoa, I have to find this kind of thing. It also helps bait stuff to make Gamma live turn 1, all that stuff. This is really good. And then Called, I will say Called is really interesting, as well as Gamma, because Ogre has like not been, I don't know, consistently played for years, like literally years. And now that it's finally in the format, Called and Gamma become huge, because Ogre on Zephyr can like end your turn. So like those are 4 cards that just say we don't lose to Ogre on our Zephyr, which is just brutal. It's honestly like terrifying, that card. Versus like any other card in our deck, it's really not that scary, but like it's just Zephyr. It's a hard ones per turn, and we really want that plus. And to keep him in scale. You lose the scale and you don't get the send, so it's pretty brutal. Then from there, 1 copy of, these are all of our like searchable defensive Zephyr cards, 1 Zephyr Path, double Zephyr War, 1 Divine Strike, and 1 9 Pillars. One other difference here that I know is that Anthony was playing double Path and only 1 War. In my opinion, I like playing double War instead. I think if you get Path to stick, that's all you ever need to win a duel. I just feel like the amount of times where like you activate Path and they remove it, you usually just lose in those instances. Like that's usually like, if they were able to get it off the field, it means you're probably in a bad spot. Now it's very hard for them to get off the field, but if they do, I don't think the second one is necessarily saving you. The one thing I could say is like, if you play the second one, it just increases the consistency in which you just open this, so you don't even have to resolve searches to get it. But to me, I think it's a one-of. And if you're going to draw one of these, I almost want to draw War, because in bad hands, War is like, can still like be really good. Whereas Path in a bad hand, like half the time, like isn't even activatable. And so it's just worse. So this is my preference, obviously. You know, you can test out both, but I like this a little bit more. In fact, I almost considered dropping a War and just playing 1 of all 4 of these cards. Just because this is a decently hefty amount of cards that you don't really want to open. You'd rather just be searching these with the engine, but you got to play them. you got to play them regardless. And so it's part of why I cut like double or nothing. I understand the card in the deck, but it's, for me personally, I'm like, I just don't want the extra brick. Okay, moving into our extra deck here. Start off with the link stuff. 1 gravity control. If you play a control pendulum-based deck, you have to play this card. It's so good. 1 copy of Frame Lord Lambda. This is if you draw Gamma, your opponent never gave you a way to use it turn 1 or something. You can make this later on. This opens up zones to do bigger pendulum summons. It's a beater, and we're just able to make that Gamma live. From there, 1 IP Masquerena. I like this card a lot because as you link up into unicorns and access codes, it makes them indestructible, which, like, playing into DPE, this is very annoying because your opponent's going to feel like they have to pop this, because if they don't, they're just going to lose the ability to pop anything, especially if we have, like, Providence engrave, that now they're, like, now they can't destroy the monster we're summoning, and all of our face-up Zephyr stuff is also protected. It just puts them in, like, such a horrible spot. Speaking of which, Lina, Unicorn, and Access Code. Lina is just like so accessible in this variant. I've played Asa in the past as well, but Earth isn't as popular in the format right now. And just because we play like triple the Neb with the Rhoda to get the Neb, and then the 5 Tellarknights otherwise gives us like 9 total copies in the deck for light monsters, and that doesn't include ZEFRA being able to send any of them once per turn. Oracle and Providence also searching any of them, like Prosperity being able to dig for them. Like, you literally always have a light in rotation. But all the rest of the stuff's pretty generic. Access Code being a pretty good win condition. I figured if I wasn't going to play the Utopia double stuff, I might as well play Access Code, which Sheneb helps us facilitate as well, just getting us extra bodies, extra link pendulum material to just push into an Access Code. All right, then we get to the Exceed side of the deck. Baguska, Dweller, Exciton Knight, Batlamias, Constellar Diamond, and AA Zeus. So as far as the differences here, I feel like this is already a pretty sizable Exceed package, but the only thing you could even argue on missing at all, I guess 2 things, is 1, the Utopia double package, which to me, I just didn't want to play the extra brick. The deck has consistency issues at times. I wouldn't say it's inconsistent. I still think it's pretty consistent. It's like, if you don't see ZEFRA, you're in trouble though. But double or nothing just being like another awful brick. The deck already has like technically a handful of bricks being like these 5 cards that you ideally don't want to. They're not like full on bricks, but they're bricks if your hand doesn't like make them good, which is tough. So I wanted to like kind of play into that as much as possible. And because I'm playing the Access Code stuff, I just didn't think that was going to matter. I mean, I guess if you're trying to shorten duels, it is what it is, but I still think you're winning most of those duels anyway, because a lot of duels you're just winning because you're putting up path, and if your opponent can't break through path, they can't break through path. Like, them getting an extra turn is not going to be the difference between them beating path or not. And so that's kind of where I landed on it. I was like, I don't think this package is like really turning as many losses into wins as I might hope. I just think it's like making the wins a little bit more convenient, which is whatever. You just got to work a little harder. But you have a little more utility, a little less brick in the main deck, and go from there. But these 2 can go on your starting board to whatever the matchup is. Both of these can obviously be insane floodgates. Exciton Knight. What I like about Exciton is he does destroy. So if you do him on a later turn after you've gotten Providence already set up in grave, you can like attempt to wipe the board and use your Providence to protect all your Zephyr stuff. Oops. But the one thing that is weird is like, because we're inherently playing a pendulum deck, we should have more cards on field and in hand than our opponent in most scenarios. Most scenarios. Not all of them, but like we're going to have Scales. There's a good chance we have Oracle on the field. So this card's just kind of weird. I don't know how consistently live it's going to be, but it could save your bacon. Especially since you could go into this, use this, and if they have to negate this but it doesn't destroy, we can go battle phase and potentially still make Zeus with 2 materials after that. So that like can still get the job done. This package is really sweet. I mean, it's not all over the place right now, like dark reliant decks. There's actually a lot of diversity right now with stuff like that. But if you run into like Phantom Knights, for example, this card becomes absolutely broken. It says they can't Foolish Burial. They cannot add cards from graveyard back to hand. They get banished instead. And it's just every time a dark monster's effect is activated, detach material to negate it. That's not even once per turn. So that's 3 dark monster negates. So if you play a dark deck, like you just win if you make this turn 1. So you make the Battle Mice, you could just plop him on top. Very easy, very cool. Or you can use Battle Mice, discard a card from hand to pop this on top for turn 1, because he can only jump on top of a Tellarknight during main phase 2, but not main phase 1. And then the Zeus. Zeus, again, is kind of weird. It has a similar thing with, like, Exciton Knight. You don't want to wipe your own stuff, because if you're wiping your own scales, you could just be in trouble. But I could see situations where this just, like, is the saving card. Like, it's the end of the duel. Both players are, like, depleted on resources, but you have to actively clear your opponent's board. So you make a Zeus. You wipe your stuff, but you know you're just going to, like, use the Zeus to, like, pretty much walk the rest of it home. And hopefully, you know, get in from there. So it can come up, for sure. If you're going to play Exceeds, you probably should just play Zeus, because it can just save your bacon so hard. And then for Synchros, 1 Omega, 1 Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend, and 1 Cracker Dragon. Very obvious uses here. All 3 of these come up. Omega is for when you resolve Gamma going first. You just want to essentially rip another card out of your opponent's hand. If you resolve Gamma on your turn going first, you just, like, it's just like FTK. You're literally hand ripping 2 cards. They probably are out of hand traps at that point. In most scenarios, they might have one thing, but if it's not exactly like Ogre on Zephyr, it's not saving you. It's not saving them. And then Scarlet, this is when you resolve Gamma on your turn going second. That way you can immediately just jump into a Scarlet and then either threaten your opponent with a board wipe to bait another negate, or it's just going to resolve, and you're just going to clear your opponent's shit and then burn them for a good amount of damage, and then also attack in for 3,000. It's awesome. And then Cracker Dragon. This card's insane. I mean, you just make this while you have Oracle on the field, and you're going to pretty much search any monster excuse me, in the deck. That's how you search Lancia turn 1. Really strong. But all 3 of those definitely come up. So there you go. That is the main and extra. 40 cards in the main. Trying to keep it as consistent as possible, of course. And the deck feels really cool. I've always been looking at the Neb and being like, this card searches low scale and high scale. It just doesn't get Zephyr. I hope one day, and Konami really seems like they're making their rounds, especially in these core sets, giving older decks support that they need. All we need is, like, another card that gets us to Zephyr. That way, if we can go from 10 cards in the main to maybe, like, 13 cards in the main that search us, like, just straight up get us to Zephyr. It'd be so huge, but, you know, that's it. I mean, that's really the only complaint I have. Other than that, the deck's great. Maybe a card that also doubles as, like, helps you go second a little bit better. The deck's already decent as far as, like, what you would expect. It's not great, but, it, you know, from what you would expect from a slow, control-based pendulum deck, it actually can. Especially this build with, like, the Tellarknights, where you can just pen summon, like, you could easily just pen summon, like, Thubin plus Zefra-Tellarknight at the same time and just, like, clear a board. It's pretty cool. But yeah, that's everything for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. As always, let me know your thoughts down below on this build. Probably won't be updating Zephyrs again until Tactical Masters, when Valiants come out. That's the next kind of drop of support that I think, like, could be playable, is, like, Valiant Zephyr. But we'll obviously have to see. Beyond the Pendulum's cool, but I don't think it necessarily helps pure Zephyr, like, amazingly. But I do think with the Valiants, it could be something to look at. We'll see, though. Thank you so much for watching. Regardless, you know, leave your thoughts down below. Can't wait to hear you there. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.